Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reflexology Exchange with me, Meg Murray-Jones. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Gary Waters, a high-performance mindset coach who specializes in helping people uncover and dissolve the hidden mental patterns that hold them back. Gary works with entrepreneurs, athletes, businesses, busy parents, and everyone in between. He shares insights into a completely different way of thinking, leading to a life-changing shift in perspective. This has an effect on all aspects of life, including personal fulfillment, increasing levels of performance, and business success. Rather than focusing on short-term temporary fixes, Gary specializes in identifying the root cause of problems, which dissolves them permanently, allowing you to have a limitless life. That sounds pretty great. As reflexologists and holistic therapists, we spend our days holding space for others, supporting balance, well-being, and transformation. But what happens when our own lack of confidence, self-doubt, or fear of visibility quietly shapes how we show up in our practice? Whether it's undercharging, hesitating to promote ourselves, struggling with imposter syndrome, or holding back from growth opportunities, mindset can have a profound impact on our businesses and the clients we serve. In this episode, Gary shares powerful insights into how subconscious beliefs influence our confidence, decision-making, and success, and how we can gently release the inner barriers that stop us stepping fully into our role as capable professional practitioners. This conversation is about more than performance. It's about alignment, self-trust, and allowing yourself to thrive in the work you're truly passionate about. So settle in and let's explore what becomes possible when reflexologists strengthen not only their hands, but their mindset too. I'm sorry about the cheesy joke at the end. I just felt like I needed that. Welcome, Gary Waters, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And yes, no pressure based on that intro. So let's go.
I've just got to tell the listeners that I have personal experience of Gary's coaching because I have been coached by him. So full disclosure, but that also means that I can say with complete confidence what an amazing coach and man Gary is. So I feel very privileged and honored to have you on the podcast, first of all. But the fact that you're going to be sharing your skills with reflexologists, I feel like you're going to make a really big difference to them. So thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you for letting me share. Let's see what flows through both you and I, and hopefully it makes a little bit of a difference.
I think it will. So the first question that I ask is that reflexologists usually come to reflexology after some sort of life event or a change of mindset. That certainly was for me anyway, and I know for many others. What has been the moment in your life that has shifted everything for you?
Yeah, I think it was, to be honest, through my own suffering. I had to get to the lowest point of my life to be able to realize that how I was viewing life and trying to make life work wasn't working. And that was this catalyst, this opening to be able to consider something else. And for myself, I got to such a low point. I was considering leaving the world, which is obviously a low that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But as I sit here now, I'm so grateful for that moment because without it, I don't get to explore and discover what I have now, which is a world that's completely on the other side of what I used to know. So it's been an interesting, about 14. And of that, I've been a coach for over a decade. And that was a real opening for me to get into this work, to be able to start to share these kind of insights too.
Thank you for sharing that with us, because obviously that's a big thing to share.
Yeah.
People do talk about dark nights of the soul, those moments when they're like, well, what is this life for? And if you don't mind me asking, what was it that helped you get out of that moment?
Yeah, it was discovering what we could call traditional personal development. And, I make the joke even on my website, which can be a little bit confronting if you've not really done much of this work, is that I'm not in the industry of personal development. I'm in the industry of personal undevelopment. And because this really speaks into what my work's now evolved into, which is a dissolution of our identity, not to go too deep straight out the gates, but, hang out with me. And that's generally where these conversations will go, but I'll try and keep it quite simple. But to be honest, I find that the normal route of travel in this work is to start off with personal development, because sometimes this deeper layer of work isn't quite accessible. It just feels too much. It's like, trying to run before you can walk. right? So personal development was a beautiful opening for me just to start to see that there was a different way. So I got kickstarted just for free of watching YouTube and listening to kind of people like Tony Robbins and Peter Sage and like these entrepreneurs, but that were both coaches. So for me, that's how the journey got started. And to be honest, I just heard one episode by Peter Sage, and just what he shared hit me so deeply. It really resonated. He was sharing a story about himself, and I'm like, that's me, right? And the fact that he had overcome that, he had moved through that, that was the inspiration for me to go, well, maybe I can too. And because, I love my family so much, that was my main reason for wanting to stay in this world, but to then go, okay, well, what's possible? So that was the open door that, I've just not looked back as I've moved through that. So that was how I got started.
Amazing. Amazing. I guess what you said about personal undevelopment is a really interesting one because a lot of people who are reflexologists give themselves the name of like healer, they're going and serving others, as I mentioned in the introduction, and yet aren't thinking about their own narratives and how they're showing up to clients, which I guess links really nicely to my first question, which is about imposter syndrome, right? So a lot of people show up and are there to serve client, but with actually doubting themselves in itself. So how does imposter syndrome show up? I'm especially asking for practitioners,
Mm.
reflexologists, but I'm sure you could say about everyone in general in the whole world.
Yeah. So what I love about this work is that it translates into all arenas of professions, because fundamentally it all comes down to identity. And so whether you're a reflexologist, whether, I coach a lot of coaches, and there's often a lot of imposter syndrome in that too, right? But it's the same level of awareness that will set you free on all accounts, we could say. The very first thing that I would just say to especially anybody in kind of these healing arts is that you're not a healer. And that might be a bit confronting. But if you think about it, if you're the one that's doing the healing, we've suddenly got a lot of pressure, right? So I'd say that the healing comes as a byproduct, perhaps of what you're sharing or what you're doing, but the healing is happening in and of itself. So one, we just get started with taking a bit of the pressure off there. It's just like the healing is very organic, not really to do with the individual so much. Um, but really, this personal undevelopment, this identity is what we really want to look into. We really want to question. I love doing kind of fun exercises of helping people discover their not a true identity, but their true self that is able to observe these other layers of identity, we could say, that we get misidentified as, right? Such as the body, such as our thoughts, such as our feelings, our self-image, right? When we realize that we're not that, we are the observer of that, then we start to understand this construct that we call us, right? Even my name, Gary, is a label, right? I didn't choose it. So we get to see it's, if you can start to just ask some better questions as it relates to your identity, the reason why this is so powerful is because you start to be able to question your limitations that you believe are true. When you really shine the light of consciousness on them, they start to unravel pretty quick, right? So as it relates to imposter syndrome, the greatest, we could say, imposter syndrome that's happening is you pretending to be limited, right? So that for me is where I would get started, and just to see that this imposter syndrome view of yourself is due to a deeper sense of inadequacy, a view that you have of yourself that you're not good enough, or that you're bad, or you're less than, or there's something generally wrong with you, that your value is somehow compromised. When that is believed to be a truth, then you have no choice but to show up fearing that you don't know enough. You're not enough, you don't know enough, and you've got to somehow, qualify to have your worth be full and complete. I said a lot. Did that make sense?
Makes complete sense. And also, I know when you said, like, we won't go too deep at the gate, but actually, I think the audience here is the kind of audience that I think will really, really resonate with that for a number of reasons. I wanted to touch back on what you said about not being a healer. And I think that's a really important thing to say to reflexologists. I train reflexologists, I run CPD courses. And one of the main things I always say is that you don't heal the client. You're there to support their own healing process. So it's about empowering the client rather. So then when you step in like that, being like, I'm here to support and I'm here to unlock something, but I'm not here to heal you. First of all, it's really important as a reflexologist because you're not selling yourself as something which you aren't, but also you're empowering your client. And then that almost can give you confidence in itself, actually, because you're not putting the pressure on yourself. I think what you said about limiting ourselves and believing that we're limited, what's almost a contradiction is that we're limiting ourselves by believing that we can heal, because then that's putting pressure on ourselves and then you'll never achieve that. Does that make sense?
Total sense. Yeah. Yeah. Really beautifully summarized. And, I fully agree because it's this element of pressure, right? Pressure is so insidious to actual performance, right? I coach a lot of athletes, and the reflexologist might be thinking, well, I'm not an athlete, but you're in a level of performance, right? So it's to be able to see that pressure is kryptonite to anything that we do, right? It creates time, it creates a difference between where you're at and where you should be. So it's just to be able to see or just feel into more than anything, like how much pressure you putting yourself under, right? How are you describing what you're doing, right? We've both had connections with a guy called Peter Crone. He's a mentor of mine, and this is kind of how you and I met. And he's got different insights, but he talks about these insidious killers of words, right? What I like to call very force-based words. So it can just be really helpful for anybody listening to this is just to observe, where are you saying words like I have to, I should, I must, I need to? Because if we really feel into those words, we're creating a world where we are pressurized to do something. And that never leads to feeling good, but also to performance. So once you start to realize that words are so powerful and how we speak is a world that we create, you start to be able not only to understand yourself and take that pressure off, but also hear others, even clients, and how they come in and they're speaking to you and they're like, I have to go there and I need to do this and I've got to take my kids to school. I must do that. And we start to just feel it, right? There's a lot of pressure. So the opportunity is to see that and see that there's other ways of speaking that leads to more freedom, such as I get to do that, which is formed in gratitude. I love to do that. That's the most powerful, right? I choose to do that. So that would just be a little practical tip, right? As it relates to pressure and healing and that conversation.
What I love about that is I was coaching some reflexologists, I was teaching them, and I mentioned the insidious killers that Peter Crone talks about.
Yeah.
And after I did it, it was so funny watching people speak and then stop themselves, because suddenly reflexologists that I was on the call with realized how many times they said, I should, I have to, I need to. I do it. I catch myself now, but it's such an amazing exercise for people listening just to consider in their day-to-day life. And the other reason why I love what you just said is because you can then apply this to clients, as you said. So in reflexology, you have the consultation at the start, especially for the first-time client. And that to me is like it's a detective space, right? So I'm checking their breathing, how they're showing up, and then what they say and then what they don't say. So there's so much to do with that consultation, which I'm sure I'll do a podcast about another time. But as you said, what an invitation for reflexologists to hear the I have tos, I should, I need tos, and then understand the pressure that they're putting on their bodies. So thank you. That's an amazing thing for us as reflexologists to think about, but also to support our clients with. I think that goes quite nicely to the next question I had for you, which is about around confidence, which is the reflexologists, many reflexologists that I know anyway from speaking to them do struggle with confidence, especially around pricing and especially around boundaries. So when we spoke before about not being a healer, sometimes our clients do come to us with the belief need for us to heal them. So it's not just us on ourselves, it's also the client too. So that's the boundaries piece. And then pricing is always a big one, right? Like, what is my value? And also because it's a human being, an individual putting a price on themselves, it's almost like I'm pricing myself rather than my work. What's really going on under the surface there? And is there anything that you can advise or support with around that?
Absolutely. And I think you said it so beautifully. What is my value is a wonderful kind of open sesame here to actually get to what's truly going on. Because most people, they have their self-worth linked to their net worth, right? So as net worth goes up, their self-worth goes up. But if their net worth goes down, their self-worth goes down. The key with it all is to see that people don't have a problem with confidence. It goes into similar with like the imposter syndrome, right? They don't have a problem with that. They have we could say an issue with their self-worth, which is directly related to who they are for themselves, right? Their identity. As I like to joke, this identity that they've become misidentified with, right? So confidence is naturally there. It's just there, right? Worth is naturally there. What we have on top of that are conversations that we're not. So if our worth is somehow compromised, then why are we going to be confident? So we stay true to our labels. So as you start to explore your identity, like the root of it is I am, and then everything that follows, we believe is stuck on with super glue, right? But really it's attached with Velcro, and we can rip those labels off when we see that they're no longer true. But because we've believed these narratives, these stories, these conversations, this essentially programming and conditioning for such a long time, often it's created in childhood. We've been looking through the lens of our identity for so long that it just feels like it's true and it's normal. But when we can see, and if you can be with somebody that can really listen to kind of pinpoint out, is that actually true about you? In its dissolution, confidence is revealed, right? Power is revealed. Love is revealed. The sense of freedom, it's revealed because it's there. So that's the good news. It's like it's all there. And this is that difference between kind of personal development and personal undevelopment, is that personal development, we're trying to solve our identity. We're trying to become something. We're functioning from a sense of lack and a sense of like, we don't have enough or we're not enough. So we've got to get it from out there. And when I get it, then I'll be enough. Then I can be happy, right? Then I fundamentally can relax. But the game that I love to play with people is to flip the script and to say that actually it's not about finding it out there. It's about revealing that it's already in here. So it's if you can discover the codes that you've created, this conditioning, and you can learn how to dissolve it via truth, then what you're left with is these natural qualities of your true self.
Wow.
Yeah.
What came up with for me during that was client outcomes, because you said about us looking externally. And I definitely have done this before, which is I have treated someone and, they've had an amazing outcome. They're feeling really good. And that makes me feel good. And it almost can become a little bit slippery then, because I am creating my self-worth through my client's success. On the flip of that, if a client comes back and says, I didn't enjoy that. I didn't sleep at all last night. My mind was buzzing all night. And that may be because something has been brought up by the treatment, but that can also make someone feel not so good about themselves. Is there a way that we can separate our self-worth from client outcomes?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful question. And it's something I can really relate to because, as I started this work, I started moving into coaching. And what I discovered, which I didn't know at the time, was that there was a big component of my ego involved in my coaching, right? So if my clients weren't getting results, then I'd be like sad. But if they were getting great results, then I'd be like high and happy, right? But there's still me there, meaning that, my worth is dependent on an external circumstance. And that is the opportunity to really explore quite gently, which is whether that's true. So as you start to discover actually self-worth hasn't gone anywhere since the moment we were born, right? Then what starts to happen is you start to garner a new relationship to clients. right? So for me, I like to just inquire, is it clean what I'm doing, right? Because for me, I contribute now from having done this for a while and got rid of a lot more of my old identity, right? I contribute from a space where I share what I know, and if it lands, great. But their progress is a byproduct of their learning, not of my coaching. Right. So I stay open to contribution. I'm always up leveling. I'm getting up at like stupid o'clock to, really hone my craft. I spend a lot of time because I'm so committed, mainly because I love it. Right. But it's to see that if I've got my self worth linked with their results, I'm screwed, right? Because they might not put in the effort, or they might not do the exercises, or they might not rewatch, in my case, the sessions, right? But it's just to be able to get to a place where your worth is not linked to theirs because you know it isn't. You start to be able to show up as a better, we could say, channel to be able to help people, right? Because the reason I said, is it clean? Is because if it's not, then we've got something invested in the outcome. So that would be to really investigate and consider whether it's true, right? So when we know that we can just give what we know, for me, it's I know what I know. I don't know what I don't know, but I'll just try my best. And if that's helpful, great. And if not, also great. Do you see?
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of reflexologists like, wow, actually, the unraveling of the reflexologist client relationship, of what it's seen as with a slight um, weight or bias towards the reflexologist in a way, and kind of bringing down to equal, is, I think, quite an interesting one, because in years gone by, the practitioner, the therapist, kind of was given a revered status of knowing everything. But that puts, I think that goes back to what we said in question one, that puts a massive pressure on us as a reflexologist, and almost puts our clients at a worse starting point anyway, because they're thinking they're lesser than. So it's almost our view of ourselves is also having an impact on our clients, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and so, the greatest way that we make a contribution to anybody else is by doing our own work. Like, I'm my number one client. And for that reason, I'm always focusing on topping myself up, we could say. I like the bottle analogy here. I've been on the podcast. You can see I've kind of got, some water that's drunk. But if I keep taking and taking and taking, if this is my energy level, then if what I'm giving is like a half a container, right? So my focus is to always top up, my bottle and give from my overflow, because then I'm not taking from me. Right. And this actually relates even into like parenting and, especially I speak with a lot of mothers, and they're like, oh, I'm drained, I'm tired, but I've got to do this. Otherwise I'm not a good mum. But to actually see that the most, selfless thing you can do is actually prioritize yourself. So for me, it's really seeing that you're your number one client, and to be able to let go of the results that your clients are going to get, because they're going to get exactly what they need for right now. So for me, when I'm sharing, even today, like I could put myself under a lot of pressure and go, I've got to have some notes here. I've got to be, perfect. I've got to share something that's going to change all the reflexologists' lives. Right. But I don't have any of that going on. I have breakfast. I step on the call with you, because I trust that whatever I share, for some, it's going to be like, this guy's an absolute fruitcake. He's a weirdo. Like, what the hell is he talking about? And for other people, they're going to be like, oh my God, this is exactly what I needed to hear right now. And some might be in between, and that's all fine. But, that's come from a level of me getting, me out of the way, realizing I've never been worried about what anybody else thinks of me. I've only ever been worried about what I think about me. And when my view of me changes, then those relationships change. So, yeah, I can't say it much better than that.
I think that was beautifully said. I think it was Peter Crone that said, when we change the way we look at things, the things that we look at change.
Yeah, that is Wayne Dyer.
Okay, sorry to misquote. I
No,
think
all
Peter said
good.
that before, but yes, Wayne Dyer said that, which I think is a really
Yeah.
beautiful thing to reflect on when we're thinking about our clients. You know, I spoke to a reflexologist recently who was like, oh, I've been speaking to this client and I know what will make her better, but she will not listen. And it's interesting because I think sometimes, to go back to what I was saying before, sometimes we feel that we have all the knowledge and we really want that client to achieve. We want that client to do well and we want that client to thrive. But that's putting our own personal need onto them rather than allowing them to have their journey. And their journey might take a month, and it might take 6 months, and it might take 6 years. I've had clients that I've had for, about 4 years now. And the journey is not linear either. You know, everyone goes through their own thing, as we do as well as reflexologists, as practitioners, as you, Gary. So it's stripping back that belief that we have to achieve, which I think in this modern society is quite difficult to do, given the fact that we have been told, rest after you've done all your work. You have to be the most successful. You have to show up on Instagram. You have to. There's the insidious killers again. To be able to sit back and see that and then unravel it is hard.
It can be. Yeah. Essentially, a lot of the coaching that I'm doing, I'm opening people to a world that they are unfamiliar with, right? Whilst living in a world that is completely programmed the other way. As we cruise into this dimension called Earth, right? The game's already afoot. It's already at play. There's already conditioning, societal, that's at play with beliefs. You've got to be this, you've got to be that. When you're this, then and so we step into this game. It's almost like, the film The Matrix, where everybody's in in a world and they're totally oblivious to that world. And the awakening is to step out of that, to realize, oh, wait a minute, this world isn't actually the world, it's my world. And it's based on this inner construct of limiting beliefs. We could say programs that we've taken on, not our fault, right? We learn this as kids, and we could say consciousness is actually innocent, but it's programmable. So from that standpoint, we take on and we take it on as truth from our care providers, mum, dad, teachers, coaches, and we start to form a world. But in a place where we think there's one world, there's actually more likely 8 billion worlds, because our perspective creates our reality. So that's what I love about that quote that you shared by Wayne Dyer. I only corrected it because I'm probably going to use so many Peter Crone quotes that we've got to share the love a little bit in different directions.
No, and it's really important to make sure the right person gets credited.
Yeah. And to be honest, sometimes I've realized in podcasts, I'm just saying stuff and I'm like, I've just outright stolen that from somebody and I've not quoted them. So, I almost feel like I should start by saying, by the way, if I haven't quoted the right person, sorry. For me, just so much of this has got so integrated. I think that, sometimes I'm putting Gary Waters' spin on it and I've just nicked it. Right. So, yeah, it's fun. But that quote is so special because it's so true from my perspective that when or if we change the way we look at things, the way things look change. It's speaking into how our perspective shapes our reality. Most people don't know that. They just think I'm how I am and this is how the world is and I've got to survive in this world. And I'm going to use all of my habits and conditioning to do so. What we're kind of speaking about here, which is a little bit deep, which is to actually question your entire reality. Right. And to consider maybe what you thought was true isn't true. And that's what I love about the work, especially when we get into where these beliefs were formed that have now become subconscious. You start to see, oh, wait, because of that happening, I decided I made something mean something about me and my worth, just to keep our conversation going, that now shows up in later life as a reflexologist, where they're like, I can't charge this amount of money. To bring us back to the question and the topic, right, is that I can't charge this because it isn't in alignment with who I am. Or they've heard stories in and around money where they're like, money is evil, or you shouldn't charge that, that's bad. So when you can understand yourself, then you're able to charge what you want. You might still not charge much, but at least it's a clean choice. Most people, they don't have choices. They're making decisions within their programming because it's limited. right? So if their programming is a certain construct, then within that, you only have a certain limitation of choice. Do I do this? Do I do that? Free choice is stepping out of the programming to see, wait a minute, rather than shall I charge £30 or £50, is actually an option to choose like £1,000, right? I'm not saying you do that, but at least have it be an option because that's power. Otherwise, you're a victim to your programming, and that's a powerless place to be.
And I think that, I mean, we could do a whole thing about finances and being a reflexologist, because I know that'd be a really powerful one. I think that also links really nicely to clients' behavior towards reflexologists. There's a lot of chat about clients saying it's too expensive, cancelling at the last minute, kind of making quite big demands on reflexologists. And I think that in this profession, there are a lot of really lovely people, but we also have the ability to care so much about that person that we neglect our own self-worth, to kind of bring it all back to the self-worth point, that sometimes those outside forces, especially a client, can start to dictate who we are rather than knowing our own inner worth. So I think that's also really something to reflect on for the audience.
Absolutely. And it's to really realize, though, that they're just saying something or they're just doing something, right? It doesn't, like, we're taking that on to mean something. Right. So it really is powerful to see that, I could have a client and they could be like, you got to help me do this. And I'm paying all of this cash to do that. Cause to be honest, it ain't cheap to work with me. Right. But it's just like, you've got to get this result. And I'm like, well, that's great. But because I know my own sense of worth and I know what I'm capable of, and because I've released myself from their outcome, they can say whatever they want. Otherwise, I'm worrying about what they're thinking about me. Do you see? So when we really we're never worried about what they're thinking of us. We're worried about our view of ourselves and protecting that. Then we start to be able to really engage with people where they can have their view. They can say what they want. They can have their expectations, right? They can badmouth coaching. They can badmouth reflexology. And it's just like, okay, thanks for sharing. Would you like a cuddle, a coffee? What do you need? You're not impacted by that because they're fundamentally making a sound, right? As it relates to what they might say. So it's like, when we really get the physics of it, somebody makes a sound and now my nervous system is in survival mode. It's like something within my programming is viewing that as a potential threat that I've now got to adjust or perform in some form of way. But when we see it's not a threat, it's not a death threat, they're just a client, right? Then we are able to really start to let go of this, reaction of survival essentially within our workplace.
To make sure people realize that I'm not standing here from a pedestal thinking that I've never been this. This was me. And it still is to a certain degree. I really care about other people. And that when I was younger definitely trickled into caring what other people thought of me as my own survival. And no wonder I'm in a client based service, because that kind of really drove me. And what I have learned through you, Gary, and through my own practice and work is that it isn't a case of, right, tomorrow, suddenly I'm just not going to care what anyone thinks. And for all of you listening, it is a practice. A client now says a negative thing and I can reflect on it now, feel it in my body, the fight or flight, the threat that, oh my goodness, my world's going to end. As you said beautifully, it's words that someone's saying. I think in reflexology, you can get a lot of, I don't believe in reflexology. Why would, a foot massage make me feel better? Like all these things that can be said
Mm.
that are words that isn't a reflection on us as a practitioner.
So beautifully said. And I love your authenticity and your vulnerability in that share, which I think will really resonate with people, right? Because that is a sign of like the work that you've done for yourself, where you feel less fear to be able just to share these things, which is really wonderful. We're not saying don't care, right? It's just understand the difference between care and worrying. So I want you to care more, right? But don't worry.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful thing when you can connect with, because what most people do is they worry. So we're caring, and anybody out there that doesn't think like a foot massage is going to be helpful, well, I'm going to disagree, right? Because like that's one of my favorite things. So like I'm a big fan. So yeah, it is to see that subtle difference, but it's really powerful to be able to understand it for sure.
I think there's been so much for people to reflect upon. I think maybe 2 listens of this might be beneficial. To anyone listening, please share on the AOR Instagram page or on Facebook on what really came up for you for this one, because I feel like quite a bit will, and I'm gonna be around on the AOR Instagram page to always answer your questions. Gary, if there's a place that people can find you to find out more about your work, please share, and I'll obviously share it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, thank you. It means a lot. And, for me, there's a couple of places that I mainly hang out on. One is the gram that you just mentioned. So, handle is I am Gary Waters. That's where I often share things for free because that's how I learned to, you know, start in this work. It's a way that I get to share what I know for people that can't access the work directly. And then it's my website, garywaters.co.uk. And that's kind of the direct way to reach me if you want to engage in any coaching or want to find out some more. So that's the ways to get a hold of me. What I would share, for the listeners is that you got an incredible host. You know, what you have access to here with Meg is not just information that's going to be data for later, but really things that are going to impact your world if you can pay attention. So you're very lucky to have her. So that's
Oh,
my little.
Gary, I'm gonna get a bit emotional. Really kind, thank you so much. Yeah, I think please share to anyone that you think it might be relevant to. I know this is especially about reflexologists, but if you have other friends, family that you think this might resonate with, please do. Gary is a very special guest to get on. So, Gary, thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes, take care. Thank you.
Bye bye.